Thank you all for coming. Welcome to the East West Center. Welcome to our participants online. There's a very large audience dialing in from across the region and locally. So we're happy to have all of you here, whether in person or online, for a very special event called a culmination of over a year's hard work by our featured speaker and the many people who have been supporting him. So welcome. Just in the way of a quick housekeeping announcement, for those of you online and in person, this event is being recorded. And today what we'll do is we'll have some brief remarks to welcome our guest speaker. We'll turn it over to him to share some exciting work that he has reached the completion of, and then we'll have an opportunity to talk story and engage in some questions and answers. And we'll go from there. So welcome again, and I'm very excited to have this event finally come today. To kick us off, I'd like to introduce the Director of the Pacific Islands Development Program, Dr. Mary Hattori, who will kick us off with some welcoming remarks. Dr. Hattori.
Aloha hapade, Isambula. Greetings and Velina Mai, welcome. I'm so happy to be here, and it's so good to welcome our scholar Rufino, and looking forward to this afternoon's event. I am a native Chamorro of the island of Guam, and today I want to convey warm greetings and aloha from the East-West Center on the island of Oahu. We acknowledge with respect and humility the ancestral lands of the Kanaka Maoli, the indigenous people of this place. Today in Hawaii, it's Thursday, and before we proceed, I'd like to mention the Global Thursdays in Black campaign. PIDP and other Pacific regional organizations support this important international cause, wearing black as a gesture that reminds us all of our responsibility to speak out against gender-based violence, and we invite you to join us in this global movement. I'd also like to acknowledge our funder, the Asian Development Bank, the Pacific Department, and thank the leadership of that department, especially Mr. Jung Ho Kim and Ms. Kat Baramita, and you'll hear more about this partnership in a few minutes. Today's event is a presentation of the inaugural report of research supported by this fellowship, the realization of an idea conceived by several colleagues in the East-West Center, the outcome of a collaboration across the center and represented by people you'll meet shortly. I remember our first conversations about this project with ADB in the early discussions where the seeds of this project were planted occurred in early 2020. And so it's we had some delays with the pandemic and other issues related to that. And it's so beautiful to see the way Rufino's research study has emerged in partnership and collaboration with communities across Oceania and with so many supporters across the region. As I was reading your study and thinking about that history and all of the discussions and hard work going back to 2020 with colleagues around the center, I was reminded of the Hawaiian saying, all knowledge is not taught in the same school and one can learn from many sources. We learn from each other. Rufino has learned from many community members, and I'm so glad that all of us are here to learn. I'm honored to have been part of the project's inception and to be part of your academic journey. And I'm grateful to all of you who have joined us here in person and online to be part of this journey. Mahalo, Uluhitaka.
Mahalo, Dr. Hattori, for those comments and those welcoming remarks. I'd like to turn it over now to Dr. Rob Moore of our education program, who really helped to administer and oversee Rufino's progress through this award to ensure not only that Rufino was meeting the requirements of the award, but had the necessary support to do so over this long time. So if I can invite Dr. Rob to share a little bit about the ADB-DROP award. Thanks, Dr. Rob.
All right, yes, thanks, Dr. James, and welcome to everybody, and especially, it's so great to see you here in person at the East West Center after over a year of coordinating and messaging and phone calls and so on. It's really great. I can speak just a little bit about the program that helped fund a large portion of your research, the Asian Development Bank Development Research for Oceania Pipeline program, so ADB-DROP is the acronym. This is presented in partnership between the Pacific Islands Development Program, the Asian Development Bank, and the East West Center. The story that I was told about its founding was through discussions between some of us here and folks at the Pacific Division of Asian Development Bank about kind of imbalances in research support among countries around the world, and how there are some places that really have a large kind of density of universities and research funding and places that don't. And that this was meant to kind of accelerate some support for very high quality graduate level research on important topics related to development of the Pacific region. We're so fortunate to have Rufino as the inaugural recipient of this award. As Dr. Mary mentioned, it started right at the beginning of the pandemic, and so faced many unforeseen challenges. And then during that time, there were some folks who started on the leadership team of ADB-DROP move on to other positions, and this happened more than once. And so it was a process of rediscovering the program and the resources and the values and the priorities for it. And then to have Rufino come on as the first one, and being such a smart and motivated and creative and resourceful recipient, was able to take the funding and leverage its value into much more than what it was. Hosting a symposium in Suva that brought together delegates from around the region and around the world in different sectors to discuss the issues of this research, and really provide so much value to this program and its intention. We have two other recipients of the ADB-DROP award now. One is researching breadfruit in Samoa, and one is researching climate policies at the national level in Fiji, and looking at how they're implemented in challenges and benefits at local village level. So kind of bridging that gap in policies and incentives there. So we're very excited to see where their research goes, and we're very excited to hear from Rufino about the culmination of his.
Thank you, Dr. Rob, for sharing some important background on what brings Rufino here and the importance of working with our donors and our partners to ensure that our young researchers have robust support to do the work that they do. And so it gives me great pleasure just to reiterate what Dr. Rob and Dr. Mary were saying. I mean, we've been waiting for this long time coming to have Rufino on the ground. I believe the initial agreement between ADB and the East West Center was signed somewhere in 2020. And as we all know, the world went through massive change in 2020. So there were a lot of delays because of the pandemic in actually getting the award granted and then getting the project done. So for all of us, we're very excited that we've reached this part in the journey where we've made it. Rufino has made it. Even more for me to reflect personally, even before 2020, I met Rufino several years before that. I was a faculty member in the Pacific Island Studies Center at UH Manoa. I was sent to the University of Adelaide for the Australian Association for Pacific Studies meeting convened by Dr. Katrina Tewa. And I was speaking on a panel in honor of the late Teresia Tewa. And after that, a group of young and vibrant University of the South Pacific students came up to me and introduced themselves to me. And so Rufino was one of the students there. And at that time, he was a mere, what, 20 years old, 21 years old, and seemingly very shy and reserved young man. But always, through that shine, what I perceived to be shyness, I thought very inquisitive person. And so I felt very privileged many years later when it was announced and the paperwork came across my desk. I said, I know who this is. And so it was very rewarding to see his growth as a scholar since then, and the level of work he was producing. And for me, feeling very privileged in my role at PIDP to work with Rufino on this project and to provide, I think, more so moral support in his research, but whatever kind of scholarly support that we could provide. And so since 2021, I think, when the award was given, or 2022, through my own regional travel, I've spent a lot of time with Rufino talking through this project. And I'm just simply amazed at the level of work he's put into this. And as Dr. Mary reminds us, that it's always collaborative. We don't extract in our work in the Pacific. We base that work on relationships. And so I'm very honored to have developed, we're all honored to develop a relationship with Rufino. And just speaking to this work, the profound contribution that this is making, not only to scholarship, but across the region. I work in the policy space, I work in higher education, we work in civil society and at the community level. And I say without a doubt that this work is important because as scholars of Pacific studies or other disciplines, as professionals, I think there's general consensus that our work about the Pacific today and always should marry or put into concert the scientific or the empirical, the hard data, with our indigenous worldviews and our ways, our wisdoms. We all know that, but to put it into practice, I think we're still in the early stages in our development as people to do that. Rufino has taken this call to bring the two together so many steps forward through this work that, again, brings together the science, brings together the data, but puts it in conversation with, if not inferiority to, indigenous communities, their experiences, their worldviews. And so this work reflects deep relationships between Rufino and the women and the men and the children of several communities. And not only relationship between Rufino and them, but between Rufino and these communities' ancestors and their wisdoms, which are still very much alive. So it's a very profound work that, again, takes it even a step further in that Rufino commissioned indigenous artists to take these wisdoms, take this data, and speak truth to them in yet another way, through beautiful visual art that appears throughout this program. And so I personally, I know that Dr. Mary, Dr. Rob, all of us at the East West Center were very honored to have been a very small part of Rufino's journey in that regard. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our featured speaker, a very prestigious Rotuman scholar from Fiji, to share his report for us, and welcome to Mr. Rufino Varea. Rufino.
Nisambula Vinaka, Noaya Maori. My name is Rufino Varea, and I'm from the island of Rotuma in Fiji. I just want to thank Dr. James, Dr. Mary, Dr. Robert for your lovely words. And I'd also like to thank every one of you who've taken time out of your day to be here, join us in person, and also for those joining us online. All protocols observed. Warm greetings to you all. I want to take this time to thank everyone and especially to thank the Asian Development Bank and the East West Center and PIDP for this amazing research opportunity. It's been a very interesting journey doing this research and receiving the kind of support and mentorship through this ADB-DROP program. This research is I'll just wait for the slide to go up. It's an equity-based study of plastic pollution impacts on indigenous communities in Fiji, titled Tangled Waters. As you know, water is a source of life. Our bodies are made up of over 60% water. Our ocean is what connects us as a people in our region. Water is sacred. Yet more and more, we're finding that this necessity of life that we all need and claim natural rights to is being compromised and corrupted due to plastic pollution. Every day we learn just how ubiquitous and harmful these plastics are, making their way into our environment, destroying the well-being of animals, moving up the food chain and all the way into our bodies. There is no uninhabited place that plastics have not reached. And sadly, we are still trying to find the right approach with the best available scientific knowledge to address this problem. So what makes plastics so harmful, or as I use here, a pollutant to people and the environment? So for context, a pollutant is a material or a chemical substance, you can qualify it however you wish, but it has or exerts harmful effects on a living thing. It destroys or it causes it to deteriorate in its quality of life. So plastics is regarded as a known pollutant because it does just that. And what's worse is that we know that these effects are exerted at every stage of plastics. So plastics are made from fossil fuel. You can think of it as fossil fuel in a different form. And in this really nice illustration prepared by the Scientist Coalition, it's a global group of independent scientists of which I'm part of, they show here that from the point of source or extraction, the very top, all the way down to its end of life, when it becomes waste and when we have to clean it out from the environment, it shows that it remains a pollutant at every stage, causing harmful effects to the environment and people, and that's really troubling. And we know that plastic pollution affects everyone, but the question here is, does it affect everyone in the same way? If not, what is the best approach to address it? Well, to understand the problem in a more nuanced way, we have to look at the problem through an equity lens. So what is equity? You know, people often interchange equity with equality, but it doesn't actually mean the same thing. There is an analogy that explains that equity is like, equality is like giving everyone the same pair of shoes, while equity is giving everyone the right size and type of shoes that meets their specific needs, whether those specific needs are for hiking, jogging, dancing. And equity requires providing different resources or support based on individual requirements for everyone to have an equal opportunity to succeed and thrive. And we're able to determine the types of resources or support that is required for individuals that are tailored to their specific needs by unpacking it through the different dimensions of equity. So we have distributional equity, procedural equity, recognitional equity, and contextual equity. Just very briefly, distributional equity, it's like dividing a pizza among your friends, ensuring that every person receives a slice. It can be, you know, it needs to be allocated equally based on their needs and merits. Procedural equity, you can think of a class participation activity where the teacher recognizes and rewards students who actively contribute. That's recognition of equity. Procedural equity is like following a recipe, adhering to the specific procedure without making any changes to the ingredients. And finally, contextual equity is like, for example, where a company is flexible with its working hours to accommodate diverse employee needs. So these are the different dimensions of equity, but you need to understand that these shouldn't be seen in a compartmentalized way. It's used to help draw out the right information so that we can make equitable decisions or choices. So the shoe analogy really emphasizes that treating everyone equally may not address the inherent inequalities or historical disadvantages that different individuals face. And I think this is a great segue into the next part of the presentation, where we look at the understanding of pollution in a more traditional sense, and the customary practices around that. So in Fiji, the Itauke, who are the indigenous people, they use the term benu for something that no longer has value or has lost its purpose and that becomes a waste, very loosely speaking. And sometimes it can go further to refer to as mbenuda, which means something that is indiscriminately discarded as waste. But also that which has eventually become harmful or foul to the environment and to people, mbenuda. In Fiji, some communities were very particular to ensure that their vanua, their land, their oceans, was free of pollution, this understanding of mbenuda. And so in the past, different clans in Fiji, they revered like different deities which shaped their values as a people. And so for some, they revered the deity Ratu Maimbulu, who was the god of harvest. So once every year, Ratu Maimbulu would leave the spiritual realm known as Mbulu. He would leave Mbulu to visit his people. Before his arrival, all warfare and conflict would cease because Ratu Maimbulu values kinship and peace. And like if you read the background of his story that's in the report, you'll understand why. It paints a clearer picture. And as the god of harvest, Ratu Maimbulu would go through the village, inspecting their plantations, their land, their agriculture, their waterways, to make sure that it was free of this benuta and that it was clean and well maintained, that their vanua was well maintained. And during this time, the people would observe his presence in silence. And if he's pleased, Ratu Maimbulu would bless the people's harvest for the year, and then he would return to Mbulu. And upon his departure, the high priest will break the silence in a loud call, and all the people would come out singing and dancing. And then on the first harvest, the people would present their bounty to the high priest in respect and honor of Ratu Maimbulu. It's a practice still observed today, known as Wulei Sevu. So traditionally, this indigenous practice of keeping the vanua clean and free of this understanding of mbenuta is really ingrained in the values and practices of old. And even today, you can see this practice in many villages where they have regular village cleanups. The people come together and they clean their plantations and they maintain their communal areas and spaces. And even though the original motivation tied to Ratu Maimbulu might have faded, the essence of this practice, rooted significantly in Fijian culture and perspective, survives through regular community cleanups and efforts and keeping their vanua clean. It's a collective village effort. So our journey through this research takes us to the mainland, Fiji, Viti Levu. Our first community is Yandua, located here, and that is in the province of Nadrangan Nabosa. Our second community is Ngaloa Village, you can see further down. That's in the province of Serua. And our third community is Silana Village, all the way up there. And that's located in the province of Tailevu. And in the next slide, I just want to show you here that these three communities, they share similar local governance structure, where you have the village committees, the committee Nikoro, and the local groups, the women's committee, the youth group, the men's group, the elders. And they all come under the Mbose Vanua, who are the consulting or advisory body to the decision makers, Lilime Yabusa. And the people are directly consulted on matters relating to the welfare of the village or the Vanua through open dialogue. And their concerns are taken up to the decision makers who try to find ways to address these issues or concerns, the roots of it. And so this method of open dialogue may take many shapes and forms, but its intent is to find the most reasonable way to understand the nuances of the root causes of the people's concerns. And so, with that in mind, this approach of open dialogue is what inspired the methodology for this work. The research methodology for this project was based on the Vanua Research Framework, which is a culturally embedded research approach developed specifically for conducting research within Fijian context, but its principles and values can be applicable and adapted to other indigenous settings. So within the Vanua Research Framework, Talanoa research was adopted, and it's based on traditional practices of open dialogue and storytelling. Talanoa emphasizes open, empathetic discussions and the sharing of stories, the sharing of experiences and knowledge between the researcher, myself, and the participants. And it's really focused on relationship building and trust as a way to, understand the complex issues from the participants' perspectives. And so for this study, there were 30 individual households and 9 community groups that were involved in the Talanoa discussions. And to better unpack the sharing and the discussions from the Talanoa, I slowly built several short stories that were inspired by the Talanoa findings for each of the communities. The short stories were layered with experiences and narratives of the participants to weave together characters of the stories that personified or that embodied these qualities. And then once the short stories were completed, I commissioned local artists to transform these inspired stories into visual representations of the Talanoa. And I had several meetings with the local artists to discuss these short stories along with the main findings of the Talanoa so that they could really capture the nuances and complexities shared by the villages. And I'll just share with you some of the narratives from the findings of the Talanoa. These are images taken from Yandua village. Now, as you approach Yandua village, you will first drive past the entrance to this landfill, not too far away from the village. In fact, this landfill shares the same beachfront with Yandua village. So after all traditional protocols were observed, we sat down with the communities, me and my research assistants, and we began with the Talanoa over several days. We tried to immerse ourselves as much as possible into the village life during this time. And we heard how plastics flow into the marine environment and they get entangled with the corals, and sometimes embedded in the beautiful white sand. And some fishing families have even noticed certain species of fish that they could catch abundantly before, but has completely disappeared now and replaced with plastics. I recall one 80-year-old woman who is a local fisher, and she shared how she couldn't go out fishing for some time, for a few months actually, because she was afraid that the sharp plastics inside the sand would leave her wounded. And it wasn't until she had an encounter with one of the local tourists who was doing like a village tour and told her about reef shoes. And so she saved some money to buy reef shoes so she could go back fishing. And you know, these situations of plastic pollution can really affect their livelihood. And what do you do during that time if your sole livelihood depends around fishing? And in one Talanoa, a villager explained to me how regularly the landfill would catch fire because there are many combustible and flammable materials dumped there. And when the landfill burns, the toxic fumes from the landfill engulfs the villages for weeks, attracting flies, bringing with it pests and diseases. It's a serious health hazard. And the village was also having a problem dealing with its own village waste production. So what the village leaders decided was to fundraise money in order to manage their waste. Today, the village have their own garbage trucks. You can see just there. They fundraise to purchase that garbage truck, and it does bi-weekly collections. And they even pay for the young men who help in the garbage collection, and they pay the annual municipal council fees to access the landfill to deposit the rubbish. And it can be quite expensive, these fees. And you know, this is by no means a real solution. But what it demonstrates is that the people are doing everything within their own capacity to deal with this issue. Yeah? It's to say that if they could do more, they would. And then there are also waste pickers who are in Yandua village. And they pay fees, their own fees, to access the landfill where they do scavenging, and they fix, they clean, and they resell items that are still functional or reusable. And you know, waste pickers, they play a really big role in waste management. And still, you know, they face discrimination because of their work, they're marginalized. They face really harsh work conditions. You know, they're exposed to these fumes, they're surrounded by dangerous and flammable objects and materials all day, just so that they can make enough money to look after their families, to put food on the table, to ensure that their children receive good education. And so you can see that even within the community, the burden of plastic pollution is disproportionate. And it's nuanced amongst like fishing families or waste pickers. And the report unpacks these human and environmental impacts through the different dimensions of equity. So this is Ngaloa village. And in Ngaloa village, the people face similar issues as Yandua. While they are not located to any nearby landfill, their population is actually almost twice that of Yandua. So managing their own waste used to be a huge issue. They had established 2 informal landfills on the borders of their village. And it filled up really fast because, you know, it's unregulated. And then you had people who are not from the village, they're from outside, but they were also utilizing these landfills and dumping their own waste. So it filled up really fast. And what was worse that we heard from the Talanoa was that one of the landfills was located near a children's playground. And the parents started noticing that their children were getting some form of skin disease, scabies. And at the time it was uncertain, but the village leadership decided to bury that landfill and rehabilitate that piece of land. And not too long after, the same parents, they noticed the skin diseases slowly, fade away over time. And today, one of the clans in the village has decided to develop a structure over that reclaimed and rehabilitated land. And that project is currently underway. And the village leadership instituted a $10 or $20 fee for each household every month to contribute to, so that they can pay the municipal council to come and collect the garbage and take it to a sanitary landfill. So that's what they've done. And another issue that the village were facing were with tourists who would come for the village tours that were organized by the hoteliers, and they would come with their plastic water bottles. And after the village tours, they would leave it behind, and then they'll depart. And these plastic bottles were stockpiling and becoming a problem for the village. And the village was advised that there was this training program that was being run, where people could learn how to transform or repurpose some of these discarded materials into something that's useful or valuable. So the women, they received this training, and they began upcycling all these stockpiled plastic bottles into dressy accessories. The plastic wrappers, they would clean it, cut it up, and then weave it into bags or purses, even laptop phone cases. And they'd make all sorts of things like household ornaments and wind chimes. It was really interesting. And then during the village tours, they would sell these upcycled accessories to the tourists. Say, okay, take back your rubbish, but also make money from it. And that's one of the ways, they tried to address the problem. And also they face marine plastics that flow in with the tides, from elsewhere, and then it's deposited on their beach. And what the youth did was they took it upon themselves that during their regular weekly village cleanups, the youth would do the beach cleanups, collect it, and have it taken to the landfill, so that it isn't washed away and becomes someone else's problem. And in our final community, Silana village, their experiences and realities are very similar, but with a closer lens and proper context, you can pick out differences it has with Yantua and our village. It's very interesting and elusive. Like, as you approach Silana, you will notice like a few informal landfills, and where people from all over the wider district come and utilize. And at least for the most part that I was there, these landfills were always on fire. They were burning, and all that smoke, that toxic fumes, would spread long distances with the wind. But Silana is not directly impacted by these landfills. In fact, when you arrive in Silana, the village looks very clean, despite it being remote and very far outside of the jurisdiction of municipal council services. They don't get their garbage picked up, and yeah, the village has recycling stations, and they have bins placed all around the village. It's very interesting. They do face like marine plastics coming in from the changing tides, but aside from that, the village itself appears very well maintained. Well, the difference with Silana and the other villages is that they actually have a partnership with the UK-based NGO that has a permanent station in the village. And this INGO, they run various awareness and education programs, but they go further to pay for all the waste management needs of Silana village. And since the inception of their partnership, I'm not sure, but it could be close to a decade or so, the INGO has completely overhauled the village setting. They've initiated this Go Green program to promote recycling and environmental sustainability. And the idea is to make Silana the first of its kind, a leading an example for other communities to follow. And the work of the INGO has been very impressive. It's been very impressive. However, as a researcher looking at this from an equity lens, there are some more questions raised than answered. While the intent of the INGO is good, and it is good, it appeared to me that these changes were more recognitional than it was transformational. Like in the other communities, for example, the villages, they had come together to find ways to address the impacts of plastic pollution, all the way to transforming their traditional institutional systems to support and fund their community initiatives. And they place customary laws in place, as well as preventative mechanisms to help address the unnecessary waste production within the village. And in Silana, these exist as well. And I can confirm the willingness of the people is also there because they have made a commitment to becoming a plastic-free community by 2025. But the approach of the INGO wasn't drawn from empowerment of the people, in my own personal view. And I say this because if the INGO withdrew its presence and full support, especially its financial support from the village, which may eventually happen, we don't know. These sustainability programs will not be sustainable for the people to maintain themselves because they've never had to pay for anything related to waste management or other similar matters. And we can see the lack of empowerment in some subtle ways. Like we heard how some villages still use plastics as cooking fuel because it's highly flammable, but the thing is, it's also very toxic. And there's so many risks of exposure, health-related risks associated to that. And, we heard from the regional symposium that I had, you can imagine cooking your food in an earth oven that was heated to, the right temperature by burning plastics. And then placing your food on the brimming hot stones and burying it to cook for 2 hours. This is such a dangerous practice. All those toxic chemicals steaming and cooking the food that you will eat, which sadly is observed in some places. And please don't misunderstand me. The point I'm trying to make here is that external partnerships, they are important and they're very helpful when it is done right. And perhaps a few changes to the approach of the INGO in its community, in its community initiatives can improve and empower the people, particularly when it is community-led. I'm conscious of time, so I will move on. Here, I just wanted to share with you that this project gained much visibility, particularly through my engagement in international meetings and negotiations where I shared about this work. Not just me, also my colleagues who are involved in this project or who do similar project. And so the economists reached out requesting if me and my team could provide support, including for one of the communities to be included in their short documentary, as a way to increase visibility. And the documentary was launched at the Global Plastic Summit in Bangkok last year. And this is just a snippet of the documentary.
On a small island in Fiji, Sam is a fisherman who depends on the sea.
My community connection with the sea it's our daily life.
The majority of Fiji's population live near the coast, and many are all too aware of an increasing scourge in the water: plastic pollution.
When we go to the sea, even the coral, you'll see the plastics there. The fish that usually stays in the coral, they are not there anymore. And usually the fish we catch, you can catch it now. There's a lot of plastic. It's been polluting our ocean a lot.
I think Fiji has definitely changed due to plastic pollution. I believe that it's gonna bring many problems in the future.
Fiji is part of a group known as Small Island Developing States, or SIDS. These islands have a combined population of just 65 million and suffer the consequences of plastic pollution disproportionately. That's because plastic pollution damages the industries their economies depend on: fishing, but also tourism.
That's the video. And if you want to see the full video, you can just, we can provide you that link, and you can view it. It's on YouTube. Yeah? So I just want to conclude by saying that the narrative of Ratu Maimbulu is a reflection of Indigenous worldview and the relationship we have with people and place. You know, being custodians of the environment, it's an embodiment of the care and the protection for people and the environment. And this is the real meaning of circularity, sustainability, regeneration, consultation, open dialogue, inclusiveness. It's all part of Indigenous worldviews and values. And you know, we have much to offer when it comes to ideas and solutions for addressing problems like plastic pollution. But we need to be part of the discussions in a meaningful and inclusive way, in high-level policy dialogues, in decision-making processes and spaces, so that the solutions that are put forward are nuanced and equitable. Plastics are a problem for all, but there are people out there who, you know, who face the impacts of plastic pollution in a very harsh way. Their realities are very different from yours and mine. And you know, we can ask ourselves, can we live without plastics? Sure, but there are other ways to think about the problem if we care enough to delve deeper. Is there a way to have an alternative to plastics that is durable yet free from all these toxic additives? Is it essential to make all things out of plastics? You know, or are there several things that we can make without it being plastic? Can a substitute or alternative be produced that ensures its sustainability and safety for its users when it's put into circulation? You know, we need to ask the right questions and think about the problem through an equity lens if we see meaningful solutions. And I just put a few recommendations which the report captures, but is also more comprehensive there. You know, we need to from this study recommends to implement policies that significantly reduce non-essential plastic production and consumption, and encourage developing and using safe, sustainable, and essential alternatives and substitutes. And we need to advocate for the respectful inclusion of Indigenous peoples and their knowledge systems in public discussions, in policy-making forums, and all of that. And we should support capacity building and empowerment of Indigenous communities so that, you know, they're meaningfully included, and that these solutions developed out of it can effectively address plastic pollution. And with that, I am really grateful with the partnership that I made with the communities of Yandua, Malo, and Silana. I am really grateful to the research assistants who are part of this project, Kale, Amelia, who's online, I'm sure, and Eseta. I'm so grateful to the ADB, PIDP and East West Center, Massey University, and USP. And also special gratitude to my mentors in this program, Professor Tricia Farrelly and Dr. James, and also the support, immense support given by Dr. Mary and Dr. Robert. Thank you all so much for enabling the success of this project. And also special thanks to the PIDP team for helping pull this event together. My deep gratitude to you all. Pinaka.
Thank you, Rufino. And this is the time where we open up to any questions or comments for Rufino. Also to our folks online, we'd love to hear from you, your comments and questions. I believe using the Q&A function of the webinar, please input there. And those of you here, now's the time to put them under the spotlight. So do we have any questions to begin with? Hete, yes. Hi.
Hi, Rufino, thank you very much for your presentation. I do have a question that I think it would shed some lights on public policies on other islands, like Cyprus. How do you see that connection between community-based waste management to national policies? I think that there are so much potential there, but from your perspective, from your work, how do you see that link?
Yeah, thank you so much. Very good question. And so what I want to reiterate is that, many times, and we see it, that when policies at the national level are passed, it's always top-down approach. There is very little room where proper consultation processes at the grassroots level are involved before at the development or the conceptualization of these policies to ensure that it is fit for purpose for everyone. And it's the same for every space, every country, is that there needs to be proper grassroots consultation. And what I can add further is that while many of the policies that are currently seen in SIDS or in Pacific SIDS is around the low-hanging fruits, around the downstream measures of waste management and waste collection, etc. We also have a really good opportunity now to be pushing at the international level for more preventative measures. The Pacific was one of the first regions to push for this plastic ban, and they instituted it. But this was within their capacity to do so. Other countries followed, developed countries with resources and means. They followed afterwards, doing the same thing. But the point is, if you can do more, you should do more. If you can go beyond just banning single-use plastics, you should do that. You can invest in the sciences to find better approaches to addressing the issue at the higher levels, at the source point, instead of waiting for it to become waste. That's some of the what I think is worth also mentioning.
Hi, thank you so much for your thought. It's really interesting. I really like your approach on this topic, and I definitely learned a lot. So when you discussed your methodology, I read that you had a point on the free, prior, and informed consent. And I was just wondering if you could just expand a little bit on like, if you have included it in your research or if what's your plan for it and how do you, how do you document on it? Because I'm really interested.
Yes, so it was the methodology for Talanoa. We also included FPIC because we are speaking with communities, and also as part of this research, there is a knowledge exchange that's very sensitive, and we had to be sure that the people, the rightful knowledge holders who are sharing that, exchanging that information was, felt safe and comfortable to do that with the assurance that it would be handled with respect and complete discretion. And the FPIC also covered for taking photos or videos and for recording the Talanoa. And I have records of all of that. But again, very mindful of handling it, how it's handled, ensuring that not just everyone can get access to that without,
Rufino, we have some comments and questions coming in online. If I can turn to the online participants for a second. I'll start with your one of your supervisors, no pressure. Professor Tricia Farley is online and notes, excellent presentation, Rufino. How can we best ensure Indigenous scientists and Indigenous knowledge holders and frontline and fence line communities have ample opportunities to contribute to strengthening systems and positive and powerful policy change that are most likely to have the most equitable and positive impacts for all communities in Fiji?
I think that's a really nice question, because, at the international level, there's some level of mobilization amongst like Indigenous groups from around the world that are involved in this negotiations to develop a globally binding instrument that addresses plastic pollution, including in the marine environment. But that's at the global level. At the national level, or even at the regional level, Pacific in particular, the spaces, opportunities, and access that are given to similar groups at these lower levels is still absent. In Fiji, there's huge Indigenous population. Not many of them have organized groups to be involved in national dialogue where they can push for their needs and concerns to be heard and addressed. That's still very much absent. And what needs to happen is when research such as this is produced, we like academics, are developing resources and materials that one, are digestible for the policymakers and for media, finding ways to increase visibility around that work, and also harnessing partnerships such as this with the institutions that have the access to push out those resources and materials to ensure that it's reaching the right audience, reaching the right people, the policymakers in particular. That's what I.
Another question coming in from Ariella. Dolavina, thank you so very much for your presentation. What was your experience in terms of the Vanua framework? Are there any ways you would change the usual steps?
So, thank you for that question. The Vanua Research Framework was developed by Professor Nancy Lambombo Lapa, and it really does capture all the traditional protocols required for the researchers to observe in a respectful way when they're conducting their research. It has all those elements. And she does provide a really nice layout of the steps to follow. For me, when applying the Vanua Research Framework, I did follow all the steps, but not in that particular order. I did change one of the steps where there's a practice within the Vanua Research Framework where you do a Bakavina Vinaka, which is like a gesture, a presentation of appreciation for their participation and time. And usually the Bakavina Vinaka is done like before all the formalities, sitting down and the Tangled begins. I did it after. And like, I think that it made its intentions is to be a living thing because, you know, societies change and so does values and practices. But as long as you're observing respectfully all the traditional protocols that are there, you know, making sure that's the centerpiece of your approach, you should be okay. And that's my.
Still some things flooding in online, but we'll come back to our online participants shortly. I think Dr. Tammy Tabe has a question or a comment.
Yeah, I do have a question. It's a big one. Thank you, Rufino, for just being informative, but also just raising awareness about the importance of this research, not only like in the Pacific, but reaches very far. So thank you for sharing your work with us. I have a question, and you might be able to answer it now or maybe think about it. Since you're a recipient of one of the funding sources here at East West Center, I want to sort of like bring it around to East West Center strategic priorities. Your work supports the 5 pillars. You know, it's empowering and equipping leaders. Your work also allows the convening of impactful dialogues about plastic pollution across the Pacific and beyond. It also partners with the Pacific Islands. It fosters environmental solutions as well as support good governance at different levels that you've been part of. As a researcher supported by East West Center, how do you think East West Center's role should be in supporting this kind of research work, not only in the Pacific, but across the globe, particularly in regions that East West Center is working in? But also one of the things is we support a lot of young people in terms of scholarship. So how do you bring this awareness and the importance of this research to the forefront of education, not only in the Pacific, but here in Hawaii, which is one of the states that also produce a lot of waste in terms of plastic, but also bringing it back to the institution. What can East West Center do?
That's a very powerful question. I will do my best to answer that. I will say, and this is from my own experience, you know, where this ADB-DROP award, I believe that, you know, the funding mechanism is comprehensive. It allows for quite a lot of flexibility to ensure that the researcher is able to carry out its work. To the point of ensuring that the researcher themselves are able to comprehensively incorporate, you know, all the pillars that you just mentioned, that is what Center stands for. I have to say that that was my ability to have delivered on that was not intentional. Like as a researcher, we try to find the best approach to ensure that it should have those pillars included. But it would be helpful if there was an assumption that everyone who's going to receive the award and conduct it knows it. Mindful that, for example, a non-Indigenous scholar involved in Indigenous studies, that they should that they would know all of these and follow all these steps and protocols to ensure that their research is right and comprehensive and inclusive. It shouldn't assume that. I think that there is room to build on maybe resources and materials for awareness for the scholars to access and utilize, so that their research can really have a proper effect, penetrate into policy levels and spaces. I was fortunate in that, like, while I was doing this work, I was involved in other spaces where I crossed paths a lot with Dr. James in his regional work. And so I'm mindful that perhaps not all scholars may have those existing spaces to access, and an institution as prestigious as ISWA Center which already has the partnerships and access, can pave that way for the scholars to get into. Yeah, but that's what I would say. I hope that's helpful. Sorry.
As others in the room think about questions, go ahead, please.
So actually I have two questions. I don't know, one's simple and okay. So my first question is, I noticed when you had the diagram about the functioning in the different communities, that there was a men's advisory group and a women's advisory group. And then I also saw a youth advisory group. And it just occurred to me, this is white settler outside, but I've often heard of, men and women, organizing and contributing differently to social functions in an Indigenous community. But that was the first mention I heard of youth. So it made me wonder, is that new? Is that a kind of a new thing, or is that a tradition that goes back where youth were actually elevated to give advice to community functions?
So youth have always had its group, Tambangwane, as it's referred to, and they've always been around. Those groups, those groups at that level, they don't give advice. They bring their concerns or their needs to the table, saying, okay, we would like more support in this, or we found that this particular thing is not really working out for us, and we'd really like if we can find ways to address it. The advisory group is above that. They take in all of these information, they put it together, and they are the ones that they consult and they provide advice to the higher level of decision. And I've also heard that, why can't they have, like, why are the groups separate? They should be all. Yeah, they do have they do convene community meetings where everyone is present. The thing is, like, there are cultural protocols where not everyone can just speak up and say whatever they have in their head, which is why it's structured in that way to observe the cultural respect and the protocols, but also ensuring that everyone's voice moves up and is heard. Yeah.
Thank you. And also, I should probably introduce myself. My name is Christine Kubat. I'm the Executive Director of Recycle Hawaii. And we're very much engaged in the INC process. And hi, Tricia, over there. So I had a kind of a revelation, and that was one of the things we're really looking at is how, in this whole idea of what to do with plastic, some of it downstream, legacy, whatever, there's this idea that, oh, we're gonna take plastic waste and we're gonna give it value. Like, and if we give it value, then that's gonna send people out into the ocean and out into the environment and gobble it all up. And now we're gonna turn it into plastic lumber. Never mind that plastic lumber degrades into microplastics in the environment. And then, so to me, that's a very like capitalist, colonial way of thinking we're gonna address the problem. But at the one point where you were talking about the connection that the Fijians have to the land, and then their concept of value, I wonder how we could uplift that more so that people, it didn't occur to people that you could take something that is so polluting and so dangerous at every single step. And now all of a sudden, if you find somebody that wants to use it, well, now you've just graciously given it value. And I wonder if you could speak to that a little bit, because that's really an issue for us. We're in the recycling arena. All these people are, oh, we're gonna recycle it. Christine, you're gonna love this. We're gonna turn it into this. And we're like, no, it's still pollution and it's still impacting people when it gets made. And it's really difficult to push back against it, especially because nearly everyone that's doing it is very well-meaning.
Yeah, no, great point. I'm of the view that, recycling is a false solution. In that, because we know that less than 20% of all plastic waste that is ever produced ever makes it to a recycling plant. And even those that do, those that can get recycled can only be recycled once or twice. And even then, you have to pump so much chemical additives to make it, durable and functional as in its original form. So, yes, recycling is a problem. And the idea or the notion that upcycling or repurposing and placing value on those transformed materials, yeah, sure, I agree. And to clarify, when communities do that, it's okay because it's the only way they know how to deal with the waste, to manage their waste. And again, we need we need to strengthen policies and mechanisms whereby, if tourists are coming in with their plastics, they should take it back with them. And the same goes in this, capitalist market where, if we're going to export several tons of boxes of containers of water bottles to Tonga because they can't drink their tap water, there's saline intrusion in their freshwater system, so we're going to send them all these bottles of water. Yeah, okay, if aid donors are going to do that, provide financial mechanisms to have those bottles taken back out. I mean, it's a real problem when we allow this narrative of where the producer places the burden and responsibility on the consumer. As environmentally conscious as one can be, to say, like in Fiji, I'm going to stop using plastic bottles. I'm going to no longer use straws. But I walk into a supermarket and every single item on the shelf has a plastic packaging. Like, what do you do? Huh? Like, you can take your tote bag, your cotton tote bag, but like, you can't avoid the fact that every single thing on the shelf has plastics. And so, again, why is it the burden of the consumer or us to bear this problem? We need to think about extended producer responsibility in a more better way where they who are making the money also takes responsibility in this. Yes, consumer behavior is something that should be invested in. But again, that's at the lower level, you know? And so like, yeah, bringing it back to your point, yeah, placing value on repurposed or recycled items, yeah, it is a problem. And in the Pacific, that's as far as we can deal with it. We do not produce plastics, yet we receive all these legacy plastics from, and it's quite, waste colonialism, where waste from that is produced from outside, makes its way and invades our ecological spaces and territories, and to the point where it really causes livelihood insecurity. And so, yeah, we need to change that around and say, it's your responsibility as the producer to step up. Sorry.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rufino. I'll come back to this room, but going back to our online participants, we have a couple of questions from Andrew Paris, but they're somewhat related, so I'll just pose them as one. Andrew notes, thank you, Rufino. How can governments within SIDS or small island developing states that are traditionally lacking in capacity, whether HR capacity, financial capacity, technical capacity, and so forth, how can these SIDS governments engage more meaningfully with local communities to address their concerns as they relate to plastic pollution? And taking that a step further, how do you increase the body of scientific knowledge in places like Fiji and other SIDS, where there's a chronic lack of data collection, data centralization, and data accessibility?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think for governments or government departments, if you're going to receive a proposal from an investor who's going to set up a really nice recycling plant on Fiji, we're going to set up a recycling plant, we'll invest this much of money into it, and it'll employ this many people. Instead of just hearing from those investors, you need to also bring other relevant stakeholders to the table. Okay, this investor has proposed this. What are the potential impacts on their proposal, their idea, and what can we do to ensure that, okay, there is investment coming into the country, but we can provide the appropriate regulatory measures to ensure the safety of the people or the users or the employees, etc. I think that there needs to be some balance to these sort of issues.
Before I turn it back here, and there's another question, but someone is expressing their thanks, but in Rotuman language, so I'm not going to butcher that. Show you after. Before I go to this next online participant, was there anything in the room? Dr. Rum.
Yeah, so in your research and advocacy work in plastics pollution, so I know that you've been involved in many levels, right, with the international associations at meetings in villages. They're very comprehensive, but I wonder, has your work brought you either in contact with or an observation of plastics producers? And have they taken maybe a cooperative attitude or more combative?
Oh yeah. So when I mentioned in Bangkok where they had this global plastic summit, I think that was, there are always industry involved in the UN treaty negotiations on plastic pollution. But in these particular spaces where it's industry, civil society, academia, they really come, strong and prepared. I did have like a few encounters with the representatives from industry, and they, for people who may not be well versed with the issues that plastics pose, not just plastic, but also the chemicals and additives that are associated with that. If you're not well versed with it, these industry reps and lobbyists make really compelling arguments. But and that's where awareness and education is really needed. And I would place the onus on the academics and the scholars to not take this lightly, where yes, you are going to this place and you are informed, but before that, you really need to have as much connection with the policymakers who will be hearing from these representatives, these industry reps and lobbyists. You need to prepare all the other stakeholders who may not be well versed as you going into those spaces, and holding or hosting platforms and webinars, things like this is also very important. So yeah, I have had those interesting encounters.
One of our ISLA Center researchers, Sumit Saxena, has noted here, wonderful presentation, you learned a lot. Asking if you can give an example or two of potential solutions that have arisen or that you thought of solely because of indigenous knowledge, which would not have been possible if only a Western science lens is used.
That's a really nice question. I will say, there are solutions, models, that have been developed and proposed or put forward to address plastic pollution. One of it is this, I'm sure you've heard of it, this circular economy model, for example. Here's the thing, like I said before, the notion of circularity is embedded in indigenous worldview. But the thing is, when you take a concept like circularity, you appropriate it to a capitalist system and try and push it out without the principles and values that come with this, worldview, it becomes problematic. Why? Take a look at this product, plastic. You want to make it, you've developed a circular economy model for a product that has an end of life. There is no possibility of it in its current form to remain in a circular economy. It becomes waste. You can't recycle it over and over and over again. And at every stage, it's exerting toxic effects. There is no real circularity here. And if you want to apply a model to a small island developing state like Fiji, where we don't have waste to energy or recycling plants, and what we have in existence is a linear economy with plastics. We import, we don't produce, and then it becomes waste and we have to deal with it. It's a linear model. So to take, such an idea of this circular economy model and then push it out as a one size fits all, again, that's a problem. And that's not the only thing. We're talking about other indigenous worldviews like sustainability, blue economy, these are all extracted from or taken from indigenous worldviews without proper or appropriate approaches that ensure its application is successful. And so I would say that, I myself may not have, there is no one size fits all. Like I said, we need to look at this problem through an equity lens. Because plastic pollution affects people disproportionately. So if we agree that plastic pollution impacts are disproportionate amongst different groups of people, there cannot be a one size fits all. There has to be context specific and nuanced solutions. And it will differ for different countries or for different communities.
Mindful of the time, but maybe we can round out, there is a question in here, from an anonymous attendee. How do you hope your work could impact similar conversations for Rotumans? Both, Rotumans back home in the motherland and those in the diaspora?
Yeah, fantastic question. And you know what, actually, when I was first writing up this proposal, I wanted to just base it on Rotuma. Because it's important, Rotuma has a real problem when it comes to waste management. We're such a small island. We get most of our produce from mainland Fiji, from supermarkets. And then once all these, once all these products have been used and has become waste, we don't even have landfills. We have to, bury or burn, which again creates other problems. And I wanted to use Rotuma, but yeah, having a case study of just a small island, I wasn't sure whether or not it would people would run with it. But what I did try to do through this research, even though it is based on communities on mainland Fiji, it is designed to make recommendations that can still apply to communities back at home in Rotuma. It is still relevant and appropriate for even countries that have or experience these kinds of problems. And these communities are case studies. And as you can see, for some, they do differ in their approaches, but their challenges are the same. And we can think about more nuanced solutions for islands like my own, like Rotuma, that are appropriate for the people to ensure, their health, their safety, a clean environment, all of that,
Yeah, so I'm gonna take the final question from our online participants before we move on, but before I do that, there are several comments, thanking you and, appreciating this, what they're calling very enjoyable sessions, and one participant in particular pleasantly surprised that your work is including villages from her own province, so very appreciative of that. But our final question, at least from our online participants, is again from Professor Farley. Do you think it's possible for Fiji and or the broader PIDP, the small island developing states in the Pacific, to establish their own assessment criteria, particularly essentiality and transparency, for plastic products and technologies with input from multiple stakeholders that will enable a comprehensive regulatory framework?
Oh yeah, absolutely. We can develop our own assessment criteria. And even though we're not producers of plastics, we can decide what kind of products come into our region. We can decide how those products are, affected, come into our economies, go into circulation, become waste, and then what happens afterwards. Ensuring that we're not just receiving everything, the good and the bad, we can filter out through comprehensive assessment criteria around essentiality, around safety, around sustainability of these products. Clear labeling, for example, just one small tiny thing. All those things, I think the region can spearhead, maybe something further for crop agencies to consider. But yeah, for sure, we can have a regional assessment criteria. So.
Yeah, in the in-person room, if there's, does anyone have a final comment or question before you get to the next part of our program. Last chance. I feel like we put him in that hot seat for a while now, though. Okay, well, thank you everyone for your questions and comments. Before we conclude this program, Rufino would like to make a very special presentation. So at this time, I want to invite Dean Ann Hartman, Dr. Rob Moore, and Dr. Mary Hattori to the front of the room for the so Rufino can present his long-awaited and beautiful and substantive report, Tangled Waters. Rufino.
Thank you so much. So this is the report. There's only limited copies because baggage allowance on. But just to show my gratitude, thank you so much for your support, your mentorship, your guidance to enable the success of this work. Thank you so much.
While they're doing that, just to let everyone know, this gorgeous report will be published in an open access platform through the Pacific Islands Report. And Keone Williams, our Information and Public Officer, is working very hard with Rufino to get this available for free to the public in digital format. But we also, I think, have a QR code that you can scan before you leave to get access to the digital copy. But Rufino, we're very proud of you. And thank you so much for allowing East West Center, PIDP, all of us in this room, to be just a tiny part of your long journey. Very best of luck to you.
Thank you.